we're just wondering, what are your thoughts on politicians and parties accepting donations from fossil fuel industries, and what policies could we put in place to ensure that our democracy cannot be bought by big business? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think that's the backstory to everything that Sarah has said and Tim has said. Our politics are contaminated by millions of dollars which are flowing to those major parties and very sharply and obviously affecting the policies around mine approval. And it's really interesting. Your stats on Queensland are so important. The Queensland politics are so complex. But their independent research has shown, for example, that creating that mine in Queensland will actually cost over 10,000 jobs in the Hunter Valley, because we'll be flooding the world with coal in a mine that will be automated from mine to port. So the people employed in that mine, it'll be the most lean employment structure probably in a coal mine in the world, because it's so newly created, and that has the effect of reducing employment in many other parts of the state, especially in New South Wales. So, you know, we've got some complex politics that are playing out, but none of this should be about politics. It should be about science and the community. And money buys decisions which are against the science and against the interests of the larger Australian community.
Can I just add there, Barbara? Just last financial year alone, Labor and Liberal took almost $1 million from the fossil fuel industry in donations. That's just hard cash to the party. That's not the added dinners and wine and dining that these companies do in Canberra all the time for their, the Minister for Coal or whoever else. That's just hard cash to their political parties is $1 million, just last financial year alone. Imagine what it would be this year in an election year. Adani's given $50,000 already to the Liberal Party and to One Nation, and I'm sure at the end of the financial year there'll be much more disclosed.
That's a key point, as Sarah's just mentioned, at the end of the financial year, and because that present ruling is that these such donations in a political year, an election year, is 24 weeks or 16 weeks. 16 weeks that they have to disclose. And 24 weeks after it is disclosed. And that's an election year. In a non-election year, it's basically annually. So I was very pleased that Sarah and all of her colleagues and others of the crossbench signed a parliamentary transparency charter that we had passed in the Senate in the last week of our sitting. And one of the aspects of it was as close to practical real-time disclosure of donations of over $1,000 or more. Presently, the level is $13,800. You can do $13,700 many times. It won't be disclosed. And as I said, it takes 16 weeks, 24 weeks realistically in an election year. So many of the donations that are being made now will not be known until the end of the year. And so this would improve the understanding of the community in terms of what donations are being made and where, and also other aspects of the Transparency Charter are to do with lobbyists and disclosing what meetings are going on in ministers and what lobbyist groups, both in-house and third party, are meeting with ministers.
So transparency is a fantastic start, but is there a way we can actually legislate to put a limit on these donations?
Yes, well...
I'm not a lawmaker, let the lawyer...
Yes, there can be, and other countries have done it. In fact, other state parliaments have already put caps on the amount of donations that can be given. I think the disclosure is absolutely essential. Caps are important. But actually, one of the things that often flies under the radar, and Tim started to touch on this, is the revolving door between ministers' offices, former ministers' offices, the lobby groups and the companies themselves. So when you look at NOPSEMA, for example, the agency that's meant to be making an independent assessment about drilling in the Bight, notwithstanding the fact they're not assessing the right things, they're only looking at a very, very narrow set of objectives, but the people who run the show in NOPSEMA, a large number of them have come from the previous governments, the previous resource minister was on the board for a while. We've had chief of staffs from various companies and minister's office sitting on that board. So it's not just the money that's being handed over, it's the power of the people making the decisions. And the revolving door of lobbyists is a big, big problem.
NOPSEMA is a great example of an area of this relationship between lobbyists and the parties and the companies that are looking to exploit the natural resources in Australia. So relatively recently, in just the last few months, something called the Foreign Transparency Register has been brought in, where foreign companies and agents and governments who are working and lobbying in the Australian system are listed now on a transparent register. And one of the first series of listings included 3 entries from Equinor, the Norwegian company that's looking to drill for oil in the Great Australian Bight. Now, they were listed on there because they are majority owned by the Norwegian government, and because of that quirk, we get a little bit of an insight into the sort of full court press of lobbying that these companies do that is often kept pretty much entirely behind closed doors. And the lobbying work that multiple high-profile lobbying firms have been employed to do for Equinor specifically is targeting the major parties, but also NOPSEMA, the regulating body that oversees approval for these sorts of things. It's a really important area of transparency and accountability, along with donation reform, that needs to be looked at more closely.
And of course, the biggest issue in all of this is, if you offer a donation, what do you expect in return? And that's where we actually desperately need a federal anti-corruption body. The fact that we don't have one is extraordinary, I think, in Australia right now. We've got them in different states. I think if we had an ICAC, what's going on with the Bight, what's going on with Adani, and what's been happening with the big corporate cotton growers in the Murray-Darling Basin, all of those issues would be up front first as things to look into.
Thank you.